Good evening, everyone. It is Monday, February 24th. My name is Matt Woodruff. I am an assistant professor at Emory University and a co-host of the podcast Audio Immunity. This will be a short one tonight because it is 9:30 in the evening and I'm looking to get home, but I have been trying to update you on changes to federal government policy as it impacts biomedical science and specifically academic biomedical science in the United States. So we've been now posting these videos since February 7th, but I'm going to go a little bit back farther today because I want to do a real quick recap and then we'll get into some new stuff that's happened over the last few days, or at least has become available to us in the last few days. So way back in late January, this really all kicked off. The Trump administration essentially decided to pause all grant disbursements to all universities. Particularly those related to DEI endeavors and woke gender ideology. That's their language. And if you go back to my video from earlier last week, you can actually see what those DEI and woke neo-Marxist grants actually are. And it's things like engineering conference grants and weather stations and things like this. Basically, they're just using Control F to find buzzwords. It's absolutely ridiculous, but we don't have to go there for now. So that was late January. On January 31st, federal judge decided to block that, said you can't unilaterally shut off funds that Congress has appropriated for biomedical research, and essentially orders the Trump administration to continue flowing money back into universities and labs. So that's a relief for about a week until February 7th, when the NIH announced an additional policy that is going to cap the number of dollars that are allowed to flow from research grants back into universities for things like keeping the lights on, maintaining buildings, removal of biohazardous waste, salaries for people that help maintain these facilities, right? These are all dollars that are not related to doing actual work like vaccine development or autoimmune disease investigation or any of the things that we do in my lab and in the labs around us. These are things related to being able to do biomedical research at all at any institution. So the NIH decides that instead of the let's say 50 to 60% of federal grants that normally gives to the university, it's going to cut that down to a hard 15% cap. That's 1/5, which means that these universities are now seeing about 2/3 to 3/4 or so of grant dollars cut overnight at Emory University. That number turns out to be about $140 million a year, putting the entire university in a gigantic hole. That's when I started posting these videos. There was a lot of panic about that. And a week later, fortunately, a federal judge issued another stay saying you can't unilaterally change the amount of disbursement back to universities because there's a law about that. It was written in 2018 and it said that you have to go through these specific processes. They didn't go through any processes. They unilaterally decided to change it to 15%, putting everybody in a pretty big bind within the academic space. And so a federal judge blocked that indefinitely. Now, here's where it starts to get interesting. On February 12th, officials from the NIH in a memo, an internal memo, talked about the initial stay of transferring funds for DEI and woke gender ideology grants. And basically what they said was, we understand that the programs that we are administering here are subject to the ruling of that federal judge to continue funding these programs, right? So they're acknowledging the federal judge's order. On February 13th, those same officials in an internal memo say, quote, the freeze will remain in place until the agency conducts a review. So that is directly and blatantly ignoring the federal judge's order to continue pushing funds as ordered by Congress towards these universities that should be receiving those monies, right? So now we are in defiance of federal orders from federal judges at the level of the NIH, okay? Now, more interesting, on February 7th, as it turns out, the day that the cap was announced, the 15% cap on NIH dollars, an additional policy was launched at the NIH without any public fanfare. And that was a really arcane policy change, basically freezing something called the Federal Register. Now, the Federal Register is just a document, right? It's a document sent out by the federal government. It seems like on a daily basis. I don't know much about this at all. It's controlled by the National Archives and Records Administration. Um, and you might wonder what kind of power the Federal Register, right, an archives document might have over biomedical research in the United States. And it turns out it's all the power because congressionally in the 70s, it was announced that any funding opportunities coming through the NIH and the grant review process, right? So the process by which this entire apparatus works, all of those things must be posted in the Federal Register for X number of days prior to actually executing. So if you have a grant review committee that's supposed to review 35 Alzheimer's research grants, you must post that that's going to happen in the Federal Register before actually holding that group of people, right? Before actually reviewing those grants. So the Trump administration froze the National Archives and Records Administration's Federal Register. This is a policy now that sits within the executive branch outside of the reach of the National Institute of Health. And what that functionally means is that right now, this second, all grants across the United States going into the NIH, including the one that I'm supposed to submit on March 5th, are essentially being just tossed into a hole. They're going absolutely nowhere, right? So I bring all this up because I saw this infuriating article the other day talking about this, right? All of this defiance of federal orders, obvious policies from multiple angles targeting biomedical communities, basically identifying random grants as DEI and neo-Marxist and, all of this, right? And there was a gentleman, I think out of a Manhattan think tank that said, no, this is normal, right? Uh, it is normal for an incoming administration to pause dispersal of grants, right, in order to make sure that these sorts of things align with the new administration's policies going forward. And I want you to know that if you hear that, that is a lie. This has not been done before. What you're looking at is you're looking at multiple lines of attack, right? All targeted at the same area. And when those lines of attack fail because they are obviously unconstitutional, they are ignoring those orders and they're essentially doing whatever they want anyway, right? And it's becoming clear within our community that that's happening. Some institutions are taking it more seriously than others. There are institutions that I know of through colleagues that are now thinking about how they're going to redesignate research space, so consolidating people into smaller space. There are people that are currently rescinding offers to PhD students for future training in order to potentially cut costs. People are starting to react as if it is clear that over the coming months and years, the research apparatus that we have grown up in, that we have become accustomed to, and that has made us the most competitive biomedical research community in the world, right? We attract everybody good. Everybody eventually winds up in the United States. That's obviously hyperbole, but we get a lot of good people from around the world, and it contributes an enormous amount to the US economy. And it also makes us a really innovative and cool place to do science. All of that is being targeted at the moment. There is no defense of it. It is not normal. We haven't even gotten into the random firings at the CDC and the NSF and all of those things, because that unfortunately is an entirely separate set of policies, which is also happening all at the same time. So Anyway, a bit of an unhappy note today, but it is becoming pretty clear, I think, what this administration intends, and what it intends is to fundamentally alter and undercut the way that we do work in academic science. So we will continue to keep you updated here on Audio Immunity. I will do my best to keep on top of most of the news and keep you updated as to how that news is affecting labs across the country and specifically closer to home here in Atlanta. So thank you all for watching, and we will see you next time. Take care.